everyone, Rosie here. Welcome back to my channel and welcome back to my kitchen. I'm doing another book and bake video. That's the title for this series that I'm landing on. Let me know if you think of something better. And this one's technically a book and cook, but for some reason book and cook just sounds like a weird thing, so I'm going to call it a book and bake even though nothing is going in the oven. Today I'm going to be reviewing A Case of Exploding Mangoes by Mohammed Hanif and making mango chutney. The recipe I'm using today is allegedly a Pakistani mango chutney recipe, because this book is set in Pakistan and about mangoes. But it seems to have passed sort of through a game of telephone before arriving at the recipe I found, which I will put down below. So I make no guarantees or promises as to the authenticity or even vaguely Pakistani-ness of this recipe. If anyone is more familiar with Pakistani cuisine or cooking, please let me know down below because I'd be curious and I couldn't really find anything else out. Also, this is a book channel, not a cooking channel. I'm doing this because I like cooking and talking about books, not because I'm trying to be super authentic and like accurate. So if this is wrong, please forgive me. In case you're curious, I've chosen to make a chutney specifically for 3 reasons. 1, chutney is delicious. 2, it sounded a lot easier to make than a lot of the other mango recipes I was looking at. And 3, I just really want to turn to my partner and say, "Honey, would you like some exploding mango chutney with your dinner?" Here are the ingredients, and my laptop peeking in the corner with my notes on it, but mangoes sliced already because I thought slicing mangoes while trying to look at a camera was a recipe to cut my finger off. Sugar, salt, spices, garlic, ginger. It called for red pepper flakes, and I thought I had some, but when I got home from the grocery store I found I didn't, so we're using these random dried red chili things that I had in the cupboard. You know what? Hopefully that works. And then vinegar. And the tools are really simple. We've got a pot, a spoon, and my ginger and garlic grater. The first step I'm actually going to do on camera is grate my ginger. I thought about doing this as part of my prep work, but then I realized that this recipe has like 4 steps, and grating ginger and garlic are 2 of them, so it would really just be a me standing in my kitchen video if I didn't do something. So I've got my ginger grater, or garlic grater, whatever you want to call it, a hunk of ginger, and let's get to it, and let's also get talking about A Case of Exploding Mangoes. A Case of Exploding Mangoes is a fictional story about the lead up to a plane crash in the late 80s in Pakistan, which killed a whole bunch of really important people at the time. So it killed General Zia, who was the president of Pakistan at the time, it killed the American ambassador to Pakistan, and it also killed a whole bunch of the high-ranking members of Pakistan's military and air force and stuff. This is sort of a mystery to this day. I don't think there's any answer as to what caused the plane to crash. One of the theories is that there were so many crates of mangoes in it that somehow they off-gassed something and that affected the pilots. This is, as I said, a completely fictional take on it. We follow Ali Shigri, who is not a real person, he's just a character, in the lead up to the crash. He's a cadet at Pakistan's Air Force Academy, and his father, a colonel in the army, has recently committed suicide, but he doesn't think it's a suicide. He thinks he was killed by, you know, basically some member of Secret Services on behalf of General Zia. So Ali has a mission of revenge that he is on, and we follow him as he tries to figure out how he's going to kill the general. Along the way, this is interspersed with an imagined inner life for General Zia. So to be clear, General Zia was a real person, he was a real world leader, he really did die in this plane crash, but this book is a fictionalized version of him. So we see into his head and his world a little bit as he's increasingly paranoid and convinced that someone is trying to kill him, and he's taking all sorts of precautions and trying to figure out who is trying to kill him. As the book goes on, we also see a bunch of other perspectives from other characters, both real and imagined. Along the way, through the course of these few months and through these various different perspectives, we see how all of the main characters are in various ways plotting and scheming and trying to get ahead, and they all have their own missions and no one is being honest. So this was a really interesting book in that respect. Alright. Time to grate the garlic. Again, I could have done this beforehand, or I could have done this in the food processor, not by hand, but this would not have been much of a video if I'd done that because you wouldn't have heard my review over the whir of a food processor. One of the things I absolutely adored about this book was how vivid the sense of setting was and how well described the atmosphere was. I've never been to Pakistan. I've certainly never been to Pakistan in the 80s, and I've never been in the Army or the Air Force of any country. But reading this book, I had such a clear image in my head of what the feel was and what was happening, whether it's describing all of the details of the sights and the sounds and the smells of a busy road and at rush hour, or it's taking the time to share the detail of Air Force cadets on sick leave because their overly starched uniforms are giving them skin infections, but the commander won't let them have, less crisp uniforms. Throughout this book, the detail work was great, and it gave me such a great sense of setting. Of course, it makes sense that Hanif would have a great sense of setting of Pakistan in the 80s because that's where he was growing up and when he was growing up. And at the same time, he actually trained at the Pakistan Air Force Academy before becoming a journalist and an author. So I imagine he really drew from that a bit, and I don't want to say was inspired, but had that personal experience with which to build the setting and the world of this novel. So I thought it was so effectively communicated, and I think it's really impressive when you can depict a place where I feel like if I could stop in quickly for an afternoon, I would recognize the world he described. We've done basically all the active part of this recipe. Now I'm going to add almost all the other ingredients to my mangoes, ginger, and garlic and stir it all together. So I guess let's do that, and let's also talk about the tone of this novel, which was exceptional. One of the blurbs I read about this novel said it was a comic novel, and while it's not a laugh out loud type of book, it's definitely very funny. Dark, but very funny. Some of that comes from the various details that the author chooses to include, such as, for example, the brief interlude I mentioned above about the starched uniforms. But it also comes, I think, from the way all of the, high up in the army and political figures are depicted. There's something about the way that they're described that is so funny. For example, towards the beginning of the book, one of the first times we see him, General Zia is in his living room or something, and he's trying to practice how he's going to give the impromptu part of his speech. So, he's got a part of his speech that's planned where he's going to set aside the notes and take off the reading glasses and go, "My people, I speak to you from my heart" type thing. But of course, it's totally rehearsed and written for him by his information minister. Or we see another general who's promoted partway through the book to the head of the intelligence services, and all of a sudden decides that what he's going to do, and he's never done this before, but all of a sudden he decides he's going to wear mirrored sunglasses all the time. At one point someone thinks he might be trying to hide something, so they ask to borrow his sunglasses, and he takes them off, and immediately takes a second pair of mirrored sunglasses out of his pocket and puts them on. I don't know if I'm describing this well, but there was a lot of moments like that that just struck me as so funny. On the whole, I think part of that is that all of the characters inspired by real people are on this tightrope walk between caricature and terrifying account of unchecked power. I think going a bit further in either direction for any of these characters could have rendered it a bit less interesting, but because we see so carefully that line between this is totally ridiculous and also this person can have you killed at a phone call, it's balanced so effectively that it really set the tone and the feel for the novel. I can't remember if I mentioned this when I was doing the ingredients. I don't think I did. I've halved the number of mangoes that this recipe calls for because we are only 2 people, and much as I love mango chutney, if this is awful, I didn't want to waste 4 mangoes. I kept the original amount of spices because I saw some comments on the recipe that said it was kind of very mild, and I wanted to have a bit of kick. So I've kept the original amount of all of the spices and herbs and stuff like that. We're at another point where I'm going to deviate from the recipe actually. It calls for getting to this step where I've got everything stirred together and then letting it sit overnight. But I'm impatient, and also I've had to seriously rearrange my kitchen and my kitchen table to get this filming set up, so I don't want to just leave it here overnight. And so we're just going to simmer it. One of the comments on the recipe said that they skipped that step and just simmered it for longer, so that's what I'm going to do. While it simmers, something I want to mention, and I don't know if this is a pro or a con or just an element to the book. This is a pretty violent and incredibly profane book. I found the violence was written in a way where I would not quite realize how violent what was happening was until after I'd finished reading a part. So I'd be reading a paragraph, for example, and you're reading along going like, yeah, okay, okay, and then I hit the end and sort of have a moment of like, whoa, what just happened here? That was really extreme. I thought that added well to the feel of the book. It really helped set the stage for what was happening. It helped make the consequences for various actions feel very real, but it was also somewhat alarming. I mean, this is a book about a plane potentially being blown up, so you don't exactly expect it to be low violence, but that's a thing that happens. On a possibly more extreme but less potentially disturbing note, no one is spared the grosser side of life in this. We've got lots of talk of bodily functions, of tapeworms, of all sorts of stuff like that, and no one gets a pass for this. There's no memory of a dead president of Pakistan that is to be respected by not talking about his bodily functions. So if that's something that grosses you out in books, again, I didn't find it disruptive. I actually thought it really added to the funny feel of it, and it added to the general sense of atmosphere and the tone, but I can see that bothering some people. One element that actually pushed it not too far for me, but that I think might be probably one of the more disturbing elements of this book is a detailed discussion of a rape and a justification as to why the rape victim should be stoned to death for adultery, which I'm not someone who's usually overly bothered by that sort of thing in books. I mean, I'm not someone who enjoys reading about it or finds it happy, but it's not something that I'm super sensitive to, and I found it kind of to read, so if that's something that you know is possibly upsetting to you, just go in with a bit of caution. Alright, this has now been simmering for like an hour and a half, I think. Like I said, I cooked it for longer than instructed because I didn't let it soak overnight, but I think it's worked fine. It looks delicious. Now I just need to add a little bit of white vinegar, and it says to add crushed black peppercorns, and I've got peppercorns, but I have no idea how I would crush them. So I'm just going to give it like a couple scritches of a pepper grinder. And fittingly, as I wrap up this recipe, I want to spend a moment talking about how great the ending to this book was. I'm going to try and speak really generally because I don't want to spoil anything, because I think if you haven't read this book and it sounds at all interesting, you should definitely check it out, and I don't want to like ruin that experience for you. But this book wraps up incredibly. I really enjoyed the multiple storylines all the way through. I thought they were great. I was happy with them. But the way that they are worked in the last chapter and the way Hanif brings everything together, emotional payout's not the right word, but just the like, I guess, story payout and like plot payout from having all of these multiple storylines come together in that last chapter was phenomenal. I was enjoying this book already. I already thought it was a really good read, but the way it ended really bumped it up another notch in my view. Alright, the chutney has chilled in the fridge for a little while. It is absolutely nothing much to look at. On camera it's showing up really brown. It's kind of golden colored in person. It's not super impressive looking, I will admit, but it tastes delicious. This is so good. 10 out of 10. We'll definitely be making this again. And actually right now you might see behind me there's some stuff going on the stove, and that's because we're currently cooking some lunch to enjoy with the new chutney. To wrap up my review of A Case of Exploding Mangoes, I think what I need to say is I really enjoyed this, but it's not a new favorite. It was good, it was interesting. If this review has sounded even remotely interesting to you, I would encourage you to check it out, give it a read. But it was lacking something that I can't put my finger on, that it just didn't quite tip over into I love this. I don't want to sound negative ending this. It was still really good, but it wasn't incredible for me. Maybe other people will have different experiences. If you loved this, please let me know down below. If you've read it and you hated it, please let me know. And if this sounds like something you're interested in reading, let me know down below. Tell me what you think. If you've enjoyed this video, please hit the thumbs up button. If you would like to see more of my videos, please hit subscribe, and thank you for watching.